Welcome to Unbreakable Truth. In today's video, they say silence speaks louder than words, but they never warned you about the kind of silence that pulses under your skin like a second heartbeat. The kind that doesn't echo, but vibrates. That doesn't soothe, but brands you. That night, in that room meant for chores and baskets and clean towels, that silence screamed through every cell in my body. It didn't need sound. It had gravity. It had Josh. I never imagined a laundry room would become the epicenter of my undoing. A space lined with detergent bottles and half-folded sheets, with a squeaky dryer and a forgotten sock on the floor. Somehow that's where the rules dissolved. Where boundaries blurred like breath on glass. Where the woman I'd buried so long ago came clawing out, breathless and burning. Josh. His name still tastes like fire behind my teeth. He was 29, and I was 41. 12 years between us, a whole adolescence, and yet not enough to make it feel criminal. Just enough to make it feel like a trespass. Not on the law, on myself. Josh was family, or at least, that's how it started. My husband, Daniel's cousin. He'd come by every other weekend, said it was for business. Stayed in our guest room, played with the kids, helped mow the lawn, fixed the faucet I'd been nagging Daniel about for months. He laughed at our son's bad jokes and taught our daughter how to do a proper high five. He was warm, present, kind. He wasn't supposed to notice me, and I wasn't supposed to notice him. But somewhere in the rhythm of our weekends, in the way I poured his coffee and he said thank you with his whole face, something cracked. Slowly, quietly, until the pieces no longer fit back the way they used to. It started the way these things always do, a glance that lasted a second too long, a question that felt personal instead of polite. He'd brush against me in the kitchen, not overtly, not offensively, but I'd feel it for hours afterward. Like static, like heat, like shame trying to disguise itself as innocence. One night I caught him looking at me while I rinsed dishes. My shirt clung to my back from the steam. I wasn't wearing a bra. I turned around too fast, expecting him to look away, but he didn't. He just smiled. Not cocky. Not lewd. Just real. Like he saw something worth seeing. And that was the beginning of the end. Or maybe the beginning of something I'd never had the courage to want. I'm not the villain of this story. But I'm not the hero either. I'm just a woman who had become invisible in her own life. Daniel, my husband, wasn't cool. He wasn't a drunk or a cheater or absent. He worked. He paid bills. He made sure the cars had oil changes and the lights stayed on. But somewhere between diaper changes and PTO meetings, I became part of the furniture. Useful, clean, expected, not desired. The last time he kissed me with purpose was 2 birthdays ago. I remember because the cake still had wax dripping from the candles. And I was drunk enough to think that kiss meant something would change. It didn't. So I started folding laundry late at night, even when there was nothing left to fold. Even when the clothes were still warm from the dryer. I needed a reason to be awake. I needed to exist in a room no one expected me in, and that night I wasn't alone. I didn't hear him come in. Josh. I felt him before I saw him. The air changed. My body recognized him like a storm front rolling in. My hand gripped the dryer handle like it could anchor me. Cold metal against hot skin. His breath brushed the back of my neck before his fingers ever made contact. One hand planted on the wall beside me, steady. Intentional. The other slid over my hip like a question I already knew the answer to. I didn't flinch. I didn't move away. I didn't say no. I tilted my body into him like my skin had been waiting for that pressure, that heat, that human confirmation that I was still alive. He didn't rush. He didn't whisper. There were no promises, no apologies. Just breath and movement and heat and the crushing silence between us that said everything words couldn't. When I whispered his name just once, it wasn't lust. It was grief. It was relief. It was every moment I'd spent pretending I didn't need to be touched. And something inside me cracked. I didn't even look at him when it ended. I fixed my shirt, stepped out into the hallway and walked away. Not like a coward, but like a woman who had tasted fire and knew she'd go back for more. And I did. But that morning everything outside looked the same. Sunlight spilled over the countertop. Daniel sat at the kitchen island scrolling through emails on his tablet. I handed him his coffee. He didn't look up. Didn't ask why my hands shook. Didn't notice the bruises on my soul. Just sipped, nodded, and kept scrolling. And I realized something terrifying. He didn't see me. Not really. Not anymore. But Josh did. Josh still did. He disappeared for a few days after that. I told myself it was over. I told myself it was better that way. But my body didn't believe me. I could still feel him when I walked past the laundry room. Still hear the dryer buzz and feel the ghost of his breath on my shoulder. Then he came back, knocked on the door like nothing had happened. "Forgot my charger," he said. We both knew he hadn't forgotten anything. I let him in anyway. He followed me to the guest room. Door half open. Hallway light carving shadows across the floor like a warning. I pretended to straighten the bed. A pathetic excuse for pretense. He stood behind me. Quiet. Still. And then he said, "Is this why you pretend it didn't happen?" I didn't respond. Just leaned forward, hands flat on the mattress, like surrendering was the only honest thing left to do. And again, he moved with care. With purpose. Not to dominate, but to feel, to connect. And I let him. I gave him that moment because it was the only time I didn't feel numb anymore. Afterward, I sat in that same laundry room, holding a gray t-shirt he'd left behind. I told myself I'd throw it in the wash. I didn't. I just held it to my face and breathed in the ghost of him. Daniel took the kids out of town that weekend. Told me I needed rest. He had no idea how right he was. I didn't rest. I stayed up all night, replaying Josh's voice in my head. That low, wrecked tone when he said, "I still think about the sound you made." I told him not to say things like that. But I didn't mean it. The truth is, I liked that he remembered. I liked that I made a sound someone cared enough to hold on to. I didn't feel guilty, not in the way I expected. Not in the way I was taught a woman should. But I didn't feel clean either. I just felt changed. Josh didn't seduce me. I surrendered. That's the truth I haven't said out loud until now. It wasn't about sex. It was about being seen. It was about the terrifying freedom that comes when someone finally looks at you and doesn't flinch. Days later, I walked past the laundry room again. I stopped, reached out, touched the same wall I had braced myself against that first night. And I whispered something into the stillness. I don't know if I want to stop or just stop hating myself for not. Josh stopped coming around. Daniel noticed. Asked once in passing. "He's been busy," I said. He nodded. Didn't question it. Didn't dig deeper. And that's when I knew. I had walked too far across a line that no longer existed. The next Sunday, I went to church. Not for forgiveness. I didn't even ask for it. I just needed silence that didn't feel like it belonged to me. I sat in the back row. Didn't sing. Didn't cry. Just breathed. The weight didn't crush me. It sat beside me, like a shadow I'd learned to live with, like an old friend with secrets I didn't want to bury. I still don't know what to call what I became, but I know what it wasn't. It wasn't a sin. It wasn't an affair. It was a reckoning. With my body, with my loneliness, with the years of quiet desperation that built up like mold in the corners of my life. This isn't a confession. It's not a cry for sympathy. It's just the truth. And sometimes the truth doesn't fit inside neat endings or easy morals. Sometimes it just is. So if you've ever stood at the edge of something you swore you'd never do and took one step anyway, not for destruction, but for survival, you're not alone. If you've ever traded guilt for the chance to feel real again, you're not the only one. You don't have to like this story. You just have to understand it. Because somewhere out there, someone else needs this truth too. Like, subscribe, and share if this spoke to a part of you you've been too afraid to name. This is Unbreakable Truth. And we're not done yet.